Can you talk about where you were born?
Yeah, I was born in 1931 in northern Minnesota. As much as I know, it could have been on the Canadian border, and I believe it was in a place called Lake of the Woods, which is on the border of Minnesota and Canada. My grandfather LeBlanc was originally from Canada, French and Indian, is what I was told. And I was born with what are they, those ladies that help their mother to deliver?
Midwife.
Midwife. Born as a midwife. And my mother was at home. And sometime later, I don't know when, we moved down to Duluth so that I could get baptized and get birth certificates and stuff like that. I really never questioned my dad a lot like I should have done to find out more about that. But sometime after that, anyway, my grandfather had a sawmill in a place called Taft, Minnesota, which was way north of Duluth. And my dad had, there were 7 brothers and 1 sister in his family. And some of the brothers, including my dad, worked on my grandfather's sawmill. And what I remember about that is they logged birch trees, smaller ones. They were probably only a foot through for thickness, and they would they logged in the winter time with a flat sled and mules. And the mules, the men would cut the trees, and then I know in my own case, because I went with my dad a couple of times on the sled and got to where they had the trees cut, and everybody would help load the trees. Now these flatbed sleds were probably at least 8 foot wide and probably 16 feet long. And they had, for runners, they had like 4 by 12s or 6 by 12s with iron on the bottom. Well, when they were loading those logs, the one thing I remember about it was the doggone iron would freeze into the ground, the snow and the ice. And so when it was all loaded, and they loaded the logs real high, I remember that. But they left a space. See, there was no seat on that sled. You had to stand up to drive the mules. So they had to leave that space in the front. So that when it was all loaded and tied down, then everybody except my dad and me, they would take these big iron bars and break jab it under those rails and rock it. And rock that sled as much as they could to break that ice area. And at the same time, my dad would whip the mules. And once they got it going, it would never stop again. But then on the way back, through the woods, and the regular, kind of like a logging trail, all flat country, because that's why they logged in the wintertime, because in the summertime, that was all a bog, real boggy, real wet and boggy. So then my dad always carried a .22 rifle on that sled, and the one time that I remember, we came to this tree with these grouse sitting up on a limb. He called them fool hens. They were some kind of a grouse. But anyway, that's why they call them poodle hens, because you could shoot one and the other one would sit there and wait. They wouldn't fly away. So I remember that one day he shot two of them, and he couldn't stop the sled very long because it would freeze back again. So he made me run down and get him, and so we did that. And that's one of the things I remember about my grandfather's sawmill.
Helen, where were you born at?
I was born in San Bernardino, California,
Oh,
in 1930. And we moved to Cottonwood when I was 7, I think, because I was in school, which made me about 7, I think, because I didn't have kindergarten, I think, back then, so it was first grade. So I've lived in this area except when there was no work and we had to leave and come back to it when there was work, because over the years with George. My dad drove a cattle truck when we was here. We lived here. He worked on a ranch first for a few years, and then he got a job driving a truck. And that's what he did the rest of his life. My mom had a restaurant in Cottonwood for off and on over the years. Went to Anderson High School. And I met, you weren't born yet, so you don't remember. Met George when his family moved in. They moved in about, what, 2 blocks from our house?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I met George. The whole family. Went to grammar school in Cottonwood. Went to Cottonwood in the old brick building that they tore down. It used to be a school and then a Grange Hall. And my grandmother lived right, her backyard and the school yard connected. So that's the first place we lived. And then we moved out on a ranch at Balls Ferry. My dad worked there. Then we moved back to town, he started driving truck, so.
I think in one of those pictures, there's a picture of her dad on the Moore Ranch.
Yeah, on a
Sitting on that
horse,
horse, yeah.
underneath a tree,
Yeah.
big oak tree, it made a nice picture.
Well, the Moore Ranch was where they lived, but there was no relation.
no relation.
No, no. In fact, the people that owned its name was Jones, R.V. Jones, so that Moore must have come from an earlier owner.
Yeah, he did.
But it used to be a huge, big ranch, and now they broke it up into different sizes, because it ran clear to the Sacramento River.
It's all still one ranch, Helen, but it's all orchards now.
Yeah. Anyhow, we used to go in the summertime, we used to load up the old Model T and drive to the river and swim. That's where they put the dam in. You could walk there across the river. It was so shallow back then, so, and warm. It wasn't cold. So we swam there a lot.
The water was a lot warmer then.
Yeah, we put the dam in. It was nice. But I lived in this area my whole life practically.
Well, I don't know how much you remember, Rod, but we came to California. Well, I'll go back a little ways further. We left the Taft area when the war broke out. My dad went to work in the Minneapolis Moline Tractor Company. And they were building, I don't know, parts of tanks and stuff like that, you know. And anyway, he got a job as a crankshaft grinder. That was one of his jobs, as a crankshaft grinder. Anyway, when Germany surrendered, they laid off a whole bunch of the workers, because that was all that was left was Japan after that, and they probably had enough surplus stuff, you know. So anyway, that's when my dad decided to go to California.
Oh, that's why you came. I never did know why you
He
came.
had made a trip out there alone, you know.
Oh,
Did you know that, Rodney?
Mm.
Okay, he had made a trip out here on a train, and so he liked it, you know. So when he went back, he bought that big truck, this great big box on it, you know.
Was it already like that, or did you build it?
No, the box was on there.
That was
The
funny.
guy that owned the truck was a 32 Chevrolet. And the guy that owned it was, made keys and sharpened knives, and then the sign on it
Oh.
said, keys made here. But we painted it, but you could still see through it, you know, it wasn't that good of a paint job. Anyway, Dad, he got busy on that thing and built a, well, today you'd call it a motor home. Had bunks in it, and it had a sink and everything, it had everything in it.
And Bert was a baby, wasn't he? Because there was a little box for Bert, for his,
And Dad took the window out of the back of the cab and put nothing there at all, but sealed it in around to where you could go back and forth, you could call through that window. So sometimes Mom wouldn't want to be in the front seat, she'd want to be out in the back, or, and Jack was 15 at that time and could drive. So Dad and Jack took turns driving. So we camped out every night. I mean, we stopped. Everybody else stayed in the I don't know what they call it, in the truck. And but Jack and I, no, we had to be outside by our campfire. We cooked coffee in a coffee can. Dad showed us how to do that. Oh man, we thought we was in heaven. And on the way out here, we broke down twice. One time the drive line went out, and Dad had to hitchhike back miles and miles, and 2 days he was gone to where he could get one. And the universal joints. And then the other time was we left Denver and tried to go up over the Rocky Mountains, and we got about halfway up, and that old truck it didn't go anymore. So back to Denver we went, and then we went south down through New Mexico, and then around, ended up in San Pedro, and we stayed there for a couple weeks visiting and with all the relatives that we had down there. I had quite a few. And then we headed north in that truck and stopped in Cottonwood. And the very first person I met in Cottonwood, Dad wouldn't let us out of the truck right then, so, but it had windows in one side, and it was parked right in that was Highway 99 at that time. Right through Cottonwood, and so I was sitting there looking out a window, and here come this kid walk by, and he seen me looking out this window. There was a screen there, so I couldn't stick my head out, but I could see it. And so he stopped, and I said, hi. He said, hi. He says, what's your name? And I told him, I said, what's your name? His name was Eddie Peterson. That's the first guy I met in Cottonwood. And we were friends all of our lives after that. Anyway, so then we stayed in Cottonwood, and Dad liked Cottonwood, but didn't want to settle right there at that time. Wanted to look a little further, so we were headed for Oregon. And we went up on the Umpqua River and got a job picking prunes in this great big orchard. And we picked prunes until they were all gone. And by then, Dad had decided that he liked Cottonwood to go back, so we went back, and that's where we ended up at.
Why did you pick Cottonwood, do you know?
I have no idea. I mean, I know Dad got a job right away in what was it?
Garage?
Bud Cleveland's garage.
Bud,
Got a job as a mechanic.
yeah, Bud owned the service station, somebody else owned the garage behind.
Well, it was
he went-
Bud Cleveland's building,
Yeah.
all that. Yeah, and years later, that's where my very first cabinet shop was, in the back of that.
That's right, it
church.
was, He had all the work in Cottonwood, school, everything, but it wasn't enough, that's why we moved to Eureka. There was no work at all there. But they'd had that big earthquake over in Eureka, and it damaged a lot of the buildings, so they was remodeling, so we went over there. And how long did we stay there?
10 years,
Was it 10 years?
from 1958 to 1968.
Wow. Anyhow, we come back as soon as we could.
Yeah, I hated it over there, you know,
Yeah.
hated it over there.
Well, we loved the ocean in the summer and everything, but the fog in the winter was,
Yeah.
you know, after living here, it was, you couldn't even see out your window for days and days at a time. It was,
So what else would you like to hear about?
Well, you got some kids.
Yeah?
Oh, wait a minute. You guys ever get married?
Yeah.
yeah, we got married in
There you go.
Salinas. My
Well, we
aunt and
did,
uncle
yeah.
lived there.
In Salinas?
Well, let me go a little
California.
further.
There you go.
Well, we moved, well, first of all, I lived out on the Hickman Ranch, Balls Ferry Road with my family. And he got a job on the ranch up the road, so he asked Dad if he could room and board there, so we fine. So he was there.
Well,
And then my mom took off with a
Yeah.
boyfriend and never come back. My dad moved and Ruth went with him. So
Well,
it was George and I there. I said, we better get married, you know.
let me tell
Back
you
in those
what
days,
really
you
happened.
didn't do it.
I went to school at 8th grade in grammar school in Cottonwood, okay? So then I went to my freshman year in Anderson High. At that time, there was only like probably a dozen seniors in that high school. And, you know, it's only one building, and two-story building. Had a two-story building, tennis court, shop building, and the gymnasium. But anyway, I went to school there my first year, and I had been working on ranches ever since I hit Cottonwood. I bought my first horse in Cottonwood, and the auction yard wasn't in Cottonwood at that time. It was in Anderson, just north of the fairgrounds. Anyway, Jack had gone to the Army. So these people from Hayfork, and John O'Rourke, or Jack had been up there, and so they knew Jack, and they knew that he had a younger brother. So they come down and they asked my dad if I could go up there and live with him. Boy, I really wanted to go really bad, because it was a thoroughbred horse ranch, and I wanted to learn how to be a jockey. That was my main thing that I wanted to do in my life. And so, Dad, you know, was gonna get that dairy down in Gerber, and I didn't wanna milk any cows. So I would really have to go to Hayfork, but what happened, evidently, one of my chores up there was to milk 4 cows. Every morning and every evening. But that was the worst part of it. The rest of it was great. Anyway, I went up there and that summer, and I started to learn how to be a jockey. And they rode the race horses and all that kind of stuff. And then that year I went to school in Weaverville. So I spent my sophomore year in Weaverville in high school, Trinity High. And the only bad part about that was I had so many chores to do. 5 o'clock in the morning, I had to do a lot of chores, and then walk all the way out to the road, which was a long way. It was probably from here to the street out there, the road, from this ranch. This is a huge ranch. And so I did all my chores and then change my clothes and walk out there, and then 32 miles on a damn bus, on the school bus to Weaverville, and then 32 miles back. So I didn't I didn't get to do any sports, because I had been track in Anderson, you know, that was my main thing, because I was too late to play football or anything like that. So I couldn't have any sports, so I had to go back, do all my chores again at night, and then it just got to be a repetitious thing, you know, all that year. So then the next year, I went back down to Anderson High School for my, what's the next one? Junior.
Yeah.
And I stayed with some people named Rankin. Max Rankin was my best friend. We went to school together all through school. And so Helen's mother had married Jess Rankin, Max's father. So that made Helen and Max and Ruth and George sort of the Rankin family. But Helen never lived with them at all.
No.
She stayed with her grandmother out on the Hickman Ranch. And Ruth and George, I don't know about George, but I know Ruth had to stay with the Rankins. And I stayed there, but Max and I didn't have to stay in the house. We had our own cabin, so we stayed, him and I stayed there. Well, that's about the time that I started going to KP Dance Hall, and that's about the time I started getting interested in Helen. And,
KP Dance Hall?
mhm.
A big building on the corner of
It's
the main
in
street.
Cottonwood. It's gone now.
It's gone now, but they used to have the
But
dances
all the
there.
ranchers and all the people from
Oh,
all
yeah.
over, that's where they went on Saturday night.
And the people of the band was, the mother played the piano, the father played
The drums.
drums.
Mother was at
Well, what did Earl Jr. play, their son?
horn.
The horn. Anyhow, that was the band. And these guys would ride their horses into the dance. One night they thought they'd really be cute. They went out and got an outside toilet and drug it up there with their horses. And they put, what was the sheriff's name? Morgan?
Pete Morgan was
Pete
the
Morgan.
town constable.
Yes, anyhow, they put Pete Morgan, wrote it on it.
We call him Pete Morgan, the town constable.
And they thought they was so cute. About that time, Pete Morgan come out and told them to take that back where he got it. So they had to take it back.
We done all kinds of stuff like that. We used to ride our horses from Cottonwood over the old dump road, which is just gravel, that's dirt at that time. It's paved now. But we'd go to the picture show in Anderson because there was no show in Cottonwood. So we'd ride over there, maybe 3 or 4 of us. And they had a place on the side of the movie theater, and still there, where you could tie your horse up. So we'd tie our horses up and go to watch the show. Then we'd get out, and boy, I tell you, and we'd start winding up and down the sidewalks in Anderson. Well, you know how the railroad track cuts the town in half? So we'd go up that sidewalk, and somebody would complain. They called Dewey Caster, he was the town constable in Anderson. So Dewey would jump in his car. Of course, you know there's only 2 places to get across the tracks,
Yeah.
one on each end of town. Okay, so we'd watch whichever way he come across, we'd go the other one and get on that sidewalk. Back the other way, cut across all the stores and tapping on windows and all that kind of stuff. And you know, we'd done that cold sober, we didn't have anything to drink, just raising hell, you know. And when we got enough of it, we'd ride out of town back over the dump road. Well, in the meantime, he'd phone Pete Morgan, and Pete Morgan would try to figure out where we'd come out at, you know, but we'd always fool him. He never did catch us. The only time he caught us is when Halloween night, some of us, including myself, threw our ropes on a picket fence and drug it down through Main Street in Cottonwood. At that time, there was a flagpole on each end of Cottonwood, the Main Street, you know, in Cottonwood.
Right.
There was a flagpole on each end. And we dragged that picket fence down there and then left it. And the next morning, Pete Morgan was knocking on my door. And we had to go and rebuild that lady a new fence. So, anyway.
Cottonwood
Where-
crime
where to
scene.
go.
Cottonwood had a big crime wave that day.
Yeah, sure did.
So, yeah. And then, like I say, Helen and I was starting to go to dancing, and she had a Model A, and,
Your dad gave you a Model A when we got
you
married.
know, he gave me a Chrysler Airflow, a DeSoto Airflow. That was,
Well, when we lived out on the Moore Ranch, or Hickman Ranch, we each had a Model A.
I know,
Because we
I-
had to push yours till we got it going, then you
I had a
would
coupe
push
and you
mine
had
to
a
get it going.
sedan.
Cause I had to go to town to work and he had to go up the road to work.
I had a coupe and you had a sedan. And I sold my coupe to Doug Lamb later on. But, yeah.
Is that out by the Ash Creek? Is that what that
Across-
ranch is?
No, across the Sacramento River Bridge out,
It's not on Ash Creek, it's on, what's the name of the cemetery? Well, it pokes off of Ash Creek.
Well, yeah, up past Bateman Ranch was Ash Creek, wasn't it, or was that one that runs
No,
through?
it pokes right by the Ballsbury Bridge.
Oh, okay.
Didn't one of you guys, or didn't you roll over a Model A?
No, but she did.
Oh, you did.
Well, you and come down into the house. What was that?
Oh, I wasn't driving,
No, I know you weren't.
No, there was a big turn just before you come down into my house, and it was kind of long
Yeah.
ways down.
You've been there.
Yeah, and we didn't make the turn. And then our house is right down there. It scared my dad would find me. He was coming home from the dance, and he'd get mad. So we hitchhiked and walked clear back to town.
Well, that house is not there anymore.
But you and I one time, you didn't have any brakes on the car, and we come up to
Yeah.
that bridge, and
Well,
we
that's
couldn't
right,
come
that was
across.
in,
There's a
that was
car
in
there.
that coupe, yeah.
Yeah, so we had to go down, and we ended up.
Well,
on-
see, there was one-way bridge,
Yeah.
and I was going this way, and the car got on the bridge before I did. I didn't have a brake on that thing, so I just cut down and underneath to a fence, and well, there's water down there.
That's why they have a
Give me the
bridge.
water.
That's why they have a bridge.
No, we didn't quite hit the water that time.
I went back the next day and told the guy that I went through his fence, and I fixed it.
Yeah.
We sure had some beat up old cars. That's all we